Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Joelyn Drennan, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the podcast, Joelyn and I talk sophomore slump. New Hampshire's First Lady, Valerie Sununu, drops in for a little encouragement. And later, Amy Rich Crane, Executive Director of Reach for the Top, discusses the joys of Pediatric Outpatient Therapy. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Hello and welcome to New Hampshire Family Now Season 2 podcast premiere. As always, or I guess as sometimes, I'm joined by co-host Joelyn Drennan. Joelyn, can you believe it's Season 2?
I can't. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too, except for I think that we're due for a sophomore slump.
Is that what happens in college?
No. Wait a minute. Isn't that what happened to Bonnie and Clyde, that they actually started a podcast and Season 2 was such a disappointment?
Oh, yes. And then when they started robbing banks.
You know what? I'm thinking of SpongeBob. But the good news is we have a fantastic lineup of guests this season.
I'm really excited about it. I hope that I am a more frequent co-host.
Yeah, I got to look at the guest list because that thing just got really tight real quick. Like today, for example, we're interviewing New Hampshire's First Lady, Valerie Sununu. So, Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
If you listen to the pod, you know Joelyn and I are what can feel like floundering parents. And I'm just very basically wondering, how is your family hanging in there? What are you working on? How's it going for you?
Well, I think it's just important to understand that I've come to view parenthood as a process rather than a product, which is maybe different than what my younger self would have said when I was a teacher. And I really wanted the best for my students. And I had absolutely no consideration of what the job of being a parent was. I started teaching right out of college. It was unique for me to even go into special ed as a freshman. So I took many of my classes with graduate students, and they just basically said, we don't have a lot of undergrads who are interested in digging in on this path. They sometimes want to get into general ed first, and then they'll get into special ed. And I just knew what I wanted. And I feel guilty about my former self and how she maybe judged parents. That said, I always came at every situation with my own children as an educator with like kids' best needs first. So where are we right now? I have 2 teenagers and I have an elementary school student, and my poor teenagers are my guinea pigs. So I've been able to learn a lot through them, and everybody's in kind of a good place right now. I definitely treat my kids as individuals.
Yeah. How do you negotiate that place? Because like you had said, like, you know, I've got a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, one of which is now in kindergarten. And, you know, there is a guilt there where I'm like, all right, looking back on this, I'm going to feel like I didn't know what I was doing.
The first thing is we're all messing up right now, and they get to call us out on it. And the best thing we can do as parents is patiently wait for that conversation to come. But I think one of the things that's important, when I heard you asking, like, I really respect the role of the oldest child. I was an oldest child and my mother was an oldest child. And there were many times where she pulled me aside and said, Valerie, you know what? I'm probably messing up on you the most. So we're doing this special thing. Most of the time I had to do things and go through things that were a little bit harder, but I loved that my mother acknowledged it. And I try to do the same in my family and let them know that whatever it is that I might be tuned into, like the oldest you're messing up with, the middle child doesn't get enough attention, the youngest you ignore too much. I try to just sit with it and then create moments where maybe the moments will make up for it.
Joelyn and I think we're both the youngest, so we both wear Velcro shoes because we never got to the tying part.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Joelyn, you were explaining it's like impossible. Did Wiley get it?
I feel like no, we're still.
The special ed teacher in me is like, okay, you could do friendship bracelets to just practice making knots.
Oh yeah, that is a good idea. He did just ask me yesterday out of nowhere. He wanted to learn how to sew.
So he's seeking it out because that's what he wants to accomplish. Yeah. So I would say you probably want to do things with clay and harder things to build up his muscles. So as his dexterity increases, he'll have more success and get less frustrated because he has it in his mind what it should look like when he's using his fingers. He maybe doesn't have the muscle control yet. So I love OTs and SLPs. And whenever my kids were younger and I would be at gymnastics or someplace, I just find them. I love those tips and tricks. Like if an OT told me to do this with my kid because they were just looking at them for a second, I would run home and do it right away.
Yeah, Wiley was, he was very, like when he was younger, he was very, very sensory seeking. And one of the OT told us to put like rocks in a backpack, like reasonable weight of rocks, and just have him walk around with it. And it's like super grounding. So,
yeah.
So
when I was a teacher in a public school, one of my good friends' classrooms was way down the other end of the hallway. And so I would just tell her at the beginning of the day, certain students, I would give them a stack of like history books, 5th grade. I would give them a stack of history books and say, can you bring this to Miss, I always make up names, but like Miss like room, and they would carry the books down to her room. She didn't need them, but it's just for that impact on their nervous system.
So Valerie, as a parent and former teacher, what do you think success looks like in the education system?
It's different for me who I was as a student. I was super type A and I was very achievement oriented. And I actually parent in reaction to that, where I don't want my kids to have an overabundance of stress about achievement per se, but I want them to develop a knowledge of self and to find a path in life where they can make a life for themselves. And I've actually reframed that recently having teenagers, because I was feeling like coming out of Generation X, where finding a calling was a big thing. And I kind of wish in some ways somebody said, just get a job and make money so you can take vacations. So I'm trying to balance all of that. But what success to me looks like, just boiled down in a nutshell, is if my kids have good taste in literature and movies, if they are readers, because I feel like I can't control a lot in what their experience is going to be beyond the very short amount of time that I have them. But if they have good taste in the arts, then I feel like the world is going to penetrate their knowledge and their being. And so I worked very hard to create an environment that celebrates literacy, whether that's through all types of media.
And so how do you position yourself as a parent to be a resource for your children, like in the system?
As a parent, one of my kids, very bright, great reader, zero interest in doing any of the work for spelling. For spelling tests are this weird marker. It's kind of like at recess, if you're fast, you are a success in elementary school. And in the classroom, if you can spell, you're a success. And she was this great reader. So one of the teachers pulled her aside. Well, first she talked to me, and this is to answer your question. I really tried to let them to experience the pitfalls in the classroom, but for me to support the teacher 100%. So the teacher said, should we talk about this? What do you want to do? I said, I want you to talk about it with her and let's see what she says. Great. So the teacher, instead of setting up a meeting with me, set a meeting up with the student first. And asked and said, so what is it with these grades? And she said, well, I know how to use spell check.
Oh,
interesting.
All right. And then the teacher was like, if you're fine, she said that it makes her grade dip from an A to a B. So instead of straight A's, she got a B. Like, this is the kid where it's like, if it were me, a million trillion years ago in elementary school, I would have done anything to just increase the GPA. But this is just like a different look at what it means to have that success. And to be an advocate for my child in the school system is to kind of throw them into the fire a little bit by themselves, support the teacher through the experience, and just see what happens. Sometimes it doesn't work out so magically where the kid is going to be fine. We've had challenges through that, but that's also something to work through.
Yeah. I look at their development and it seems explosive right now. And I start to think about, my relationship with them, trying to balance work, play, family, all of this. And sometimes it feels like, now is the time for me to be most influential because of that explosive growth. And so I get worried that I'm missing it because I have my value structure isn't always what I, would propose it should be in this time in my life. And so I'm worried about missing that small window to make them feel empowered and accepted. But then there's another part of me that says, look, that window will be there. It just changes, like the shape of it. So I'm curious to know with you, because you're at the different end, how do you feel about the fact that maybe that window that's so impressionable is right next to you, but it's changing shape? And how do you change alongside of it to make sure that you're reaching in when you have to?
Reality says we cannot attend to every single thing, especially if you have a really loquacious kid. It's not going to happen. You have to parent. Like, I want to get parents off the hook as much as possible. But one of the things that I did was, and I just started this with my youngest, but when the two olders were in probably close to your kid's age, like I want to say 4, 5, 6, something like that. At Christmas time, I bought a planner for the following year, and I made a commitment to write down memories all the time of things that we did. Just knowing in my head that they're not going to remember that I took them to the playground. They're not going to remember that we went for ice cream on the first day that memories opened. They're not going to remember that they had a major tantrum one day and then they got through it, and they're going to think that childhood was this blur, and they're going to get their ideas from TV about what their childhood was like. So I made a commitment for 1 year to jot down big things, but also really mundane things of what it was like to be a year in the life of your kid.
Trying to be respectful of your time. And I know that we have a million questions. Do you have time for just a quick speed round? Joelyn, if we did a quick speed round of questions, would you do it?
Round.
Yeah, I'm great with that.
Okay, so what are 2 things you never run out of in your house?
I literally have a mini Staples in my house. You need whiteout? What? You need folders? You need poster board? I not growing up the way that I grew up, but being able to like have that stuff is sort of like a comfort for me.
Mine was just dust and laundry. So whatever.
Ketchup and toilet paper, right?
Similar line of thinking. What is one animal you wish you could ride?
A whale.
Oh, I had you as a dolphin person. Good one.
Okay, last one. What is the best unsolicited parenting advice you've ever received?
I loved one time I was walking Swayze Parkway in Exeter. I was pregnant with my second, and my first was still in a carriage, and I was just trying to catch some fresh air. And so I was feeding him jarred baby food, and I probably looked like a mess because a much older woman who had difficulty even moving stopped to speak to me. And she said, "This is the hardest time of your life. Don't let anybody tell you different." Oh. And I just felt so validated because everybody else is like, "This is the best time. Cherish it." And I did, and I do now. But to have like a much older person stop and speak to me when I'm just in the middle of like, it's 5 o'clock at night, I've got one in the oven, and she just said, "It's as hard as you think it is." That's nice to hear. What a good thing to say to somebody who's just learning how to parent.
Mine was, I remember my mom, we're trying to decide whether or not to move back to New Hampshire to raise a family. And we were in Chicago at the time, living in Chicago. And I was petrified of changing my lifestyle, my life. And how are we going to do this? And she looked at me and said, "There's never a bad time to have a baby." And I've always heard there's never a good time. And just that reframing of, it's the same thing. It's the same comment. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, if it's not now, it's going to be then. And if it's then, it's going to be something.
How about you, Joelyn?
So when I was pregnant with my son, I was really, really, really nervous, just as all I think mothers are. But I had a really great doctor, and he just told me, because I was going through, okay, do I breastfeed? Do I, sleep train? Like, do I do all these things and all of those choices and the things that you're getting like shoved in your face? And he just told me to do the thing that is right, or that I know is right, and that I would be comfortable with, not what everyone else is telling me to do. And that's just like I carry that through in all aspects of my parenting.
It's actually really refreshing to be a parent when you're in a place like that, because I don't think a parent can do what they need to do unless they believe in themselves.
That's good unsolicited parent advice right there. I think I'm going to bump my mom. So I'll let her know. Thank you, Valerie, so much for joining the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And please, 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 when you have time, come back, because we're always looking for a conversation around parenting and everything that you're up to.
Yeah, well, you guys, I hope that things are going well with the kids. Seek out those OTs and those SLPs. They're the best.
And when we come back, I interview Amy Rich Crane, Executive Director of Reach for the Top. Don't go anywhere. Today's show was also brought to you by Merrimack County Savings Bank, who proudly supports the mission and efforts of New Hampshire Children's Trust. Founded in 1867, Merrimack has served people, businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in central and southern New Hampshire for over 155 years by treating everyone with care, respect, and compassion. Visit your local offices in Bow, Concord, Kentucky, Hooksett, and Nashua, or go to www.themerrimack.com. New Hampshire Family Now is a proud participant in the Your Voice campaign. Together, the Parent Information Center, New Hampshire Family Voices, and New Hampshire Children's Trust have launched a statewide campaign dedicated to celebrating the critical role family voice plays in shaping services and systems throughout the Granite State. Because questions families ask and the information they share often makes a difference in understanding a diagnosis, building an effective treatment plan, and informing the services they use every day. To learn more about the campaign, go to nhchildrenstrust.org/yourvoice or picnh.org/yourvoice. Today on the show, I have the pleasure of welcoming Amy Rich Crane, Executive Director of Reach for the Top Therapy Services in Dover, New Hampshire. Amy, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me.
New year, presumably a new you. I just wanted to know before we get into anything, what massive overhauls of your person have you undertaken by way of resolution?
Oh, gosh. So I'm not really one of those people that does the New Year resolution, because I don't feel like they really stick. Like people get committed right away and then they fall apart really quickly. And so I just want to commit to finding balance so that I can, be present wherever I am.
You know how annoying that sounds, though.
Oh, gosh.
I'm just kidding, Amy. I'm so glad to have you on the show. I've been to your location in Dover in the McConnell building a few times now. And I know for a fact that Reach for the Top is a family-first pediatric outpatient therapy center. But practically speaking, I'd love you to tell us what that means.
Yeah. So Reach has an incredible team of 15 therapists and 4 support staff. And we're committed to providing the best possible care to children with exceptional needs and to their families. So the way that we're different and put families first is that we really focus on listening to the needs and concerns with curiosity, knowing that we can learn from every family and that we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach, because that doesn't work in the long run, is what we've seen. So we encourage our families to attend and participate in every session. And our therapists have really developed excellent multitasking skills to be able to connect and engage with the children in play, while also answering the questions and providing feedback, and also sharing in the victories that the family and children had over the course of the week since they had been in therapy.
Exceptional needs. I am so curious that as a father of 2, of understanding when needs tend toward exceptional need.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So our therapists help families identify which skill set or milestone challenge or lack of support for a specific task is interfering with the child's ability to fully participate in their daily routine. So our therapists, they look at everything from moving through their morning routine, eating, getting dressed, brushing their teeth, communicating their needs, making requests, safely navigating their environment physically. And so it really depends on the family expectations, cultural expectations. There's so many different pieces to what is our ideal of what we want our child to be. And then, like you had said, there are certain milestones and areas that you expect a child to be able to do by a certain age. We try not to focus on that as much as what's important to the child and family, what's getting in the way of them being their most successful, and how can we either build some of those milestones or areas through play, or how can we find the right supports to blend in so that the child and family feel really successful.
But how do you do that through the lens of programming? So what programs do you offer that actually achieve that ends? Because that seems like a lot.
So this year we were able to help over 500 families, and a lot of them come into our clinic here in Dover that you've been to, as well as virtually in their families' homes, as well as in the school districts. We work in the Dover indoor swimming pool in our aquatic therapy. We use equine therapy, horses movement at a local barn in Dover. We also partner with orthotists who come into the clinic and fit children for specialized adaptive equipment to help them move through their environment with more ease or less pain. And then we have staff trained in the evaluation of AAC devices, which is an area that not a lot of clinics have expertise in. And we provide specialized feeding therapies for infants, children feeding tubes, and also picky eaters. And then most recently, the thing we committed to was our staff received 20 hours of trauma training with a focus on connectedness and attachment and co-regulation with the caregivers to help the child cope with some of the significant emotional challenges, especially during a global pandemic and everything that has brought up.
We often talk about those protective factors that help strengthen the family unit, like parental resilience, social connection, access to concrete supports in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child development, and social and emotional competence of children, which is the only protective factor that focuses on the child's contribution. And I've been thinking about this a lot because my son is in pediatric occupational therapy as well. I'd love to know, how does the work you do help that child develop those skills to in some ways better fit into the family day? And how does that impact then the caregiver, the parent, the grandparent, or whoever's in that caregiver role?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we really focus, especially with the trauma training, and having all of our disciplines trained in it, because that's an area that occupational therapy really focuses on. It blends really nice into speech therapy because they focus on socialization and relationships as well. But OT really focuses on relationship. And then physical therapy is more geared towards the body. But we want every family to feel supported in every session, because we know a lot of these children come in, when you're struggling to do things that come really easy to other people, that can cause a lot of frustration. And so that social emotional competence and our response to children when they are struggling is really important. So we use a responsive approach where we validate that feeling and say, I know it's really hard. We don't want to dismiss or minimize that struggle, because this is like your biggest stress in your life. That's their stress. And it might be in play or in opening a container that they can eat. And so we really focus on validating that feeling, helping them regulate, and then figure out how they can find an adaptive way to be successful, or find some additional tools that just help them stay in that place of regulation. And all of our therapists at Reach treat with the mindset that we're only a small piece of the puzzle on this family's journey. And empowering and supporting the family is what's going to make the biggest difference to the child in the long run, because many of us are parents as well. And we know that we only have a certain amount of time to help our children find their place in the world. And we hope it's a place where they feel accepted and empowered and able to advocate for their needs. And it's hard work. It's really, really rewarding. But it's hard work. And we focus on the laughter and finding the shared joy and really celebrating those moments where they find pride and success, because that's what it's all about.
My gosh, I just had a mind-blowing empathy moment. As a caregiver of a child that has unique challenges, I was thinking about those moments where I get frustrated. But what you had just said is, look, he has to live with this in every aspect of his life. So imagine what that might be for his mindset going through, because he is aware of his own distraction and inability to tap into it. That's what it's like to actually live with something as opposed to have to try to navigate it in an instance in a day.
You know what? That's really, really crucial to what we focus on too, is because parents come in with their own hurts and their own pain and their own upbringing that impacts their parenting. And either they're doing things that are intergenerational and they're not aware of, or they're trying to do the opposite of that. And then they have their own personal needs that aren't always being met, or their own sensory needs that are being triggered by their child. That's what we try to do, is to shine some light and say, let's see how we can blend that. So I know that really loud noises trigger something in you where you're like, you're a 10, you're all the way up here when your child gets loud, but your child doesn't have the awareness in the moment of that. If we slow them down and say, do your quiet voice, do your loud voice, they can do that. They can show some modulation, but in the moment, their engine just runs really fast and intense, and they're enjoying themselves and not aware of it. And then it's triggering you the whole time. So then when they have frustration, you're already at a 10, but you felt like you were adapting to that. And it adds stress on stress, the awareness of that, and just saying, that's really valid for you, Mom. That's okay to have that, as long as you have some awareness and then they have some awareness, and we find a way that you guys have a secret word or a place or a tool that brings you both down, where you can regulate together and say, Mommy was really, really stressed out when your volume went up here. And then I took deep breaths, or I drank some water, and reflecting that back to them, that role modeling and that empathy and that I'm there with you piece is so huge to these children.
Yeah. Some years ago, I had a pretty righteous thumb injury. So when I think of therapy, I think of, grueling work to get sensation back, to get grip back, very physical oriented, where I didn't want to go. But then when I hear you talking about fun and your sessions being fun for the child, can you address that a little bit? Because it's really counterintuitive to the way I think about an occupational therapy or an outpatient therapy.
Yeah. So my daughter, she's in physical therapy as well. And I brought her to the clinic first time last month. And her initial response was, oh my goodness gracious. So now every day I get begged to bring her to work with me, because we have swings, we have trampolines, monkey bars, crash pads, squeeze machines, fun books, games galore, art projects. Through donations, we put in a life skills room that has a mini kitchen where we can do mug cakes and feeding therapies. We have a mini washing machine, a STEM room where we put science and technology and building equipment, a nature nook that has a mud kitchen and a flower propagating station so kids can take flowers home with them. We have an outdoor sensory garden, the pool, the barn where the kids do their therapies on the horse. It is just so much fun to be a therapist. It's hard work, but it is fun. And for these kids, this crew that we have here, they're the most dedicated crew I've ever seen to finding motivating and engaging activities that hides the work right in the play, while creating that just right challenge so that the child feels supported and motivated and really engaged to do this work that's helping them build those skills. It's tons of fun.
I mean, it sounds awesome. So, and you said hide the work. So how would a swing come into play?
It just depends on what the child's working on. So if the child's working in speech on a certain sound, getting on the swing and doing that back and forth swinging is just really regulating for the body. It releases neurochemicals in the brain, which helps the brain calm down and regulate. So this frustrating work is then paired with really fun work. Or if you want to do strengthening, the child could be on their belly on a long platform swing or a disc swing. And then they don't even realize this whole time they're building their upper body and their trunk strength while they're swinging through the air and maybe working on eye-hand coordination, trying to catch a beanbag and then throw it through a target. And it just looks like fun to them. They have no clue, except for when they say, oh, my neck is sore, I need a break, or whatever it is, that their muscles are really getting activated. But that muscle activation can be used not only for strengthening, maybe in physical therapy, but in occupational therapy, we're activating the sensory system where it's just flooding the brain with those happy hormones and neurochemicals that just say, okay, I'm feeling good. I can handle a little more stress, because all these challenges for them is stress at the end of the day. And it releases cortisol and adrenaline the same way when we're really stressed. And so that helps them find a regulated place to do more work that's a little bit harder for them.
Yeah, I wonder too if it starts to build association, right? So you start to have this release of dopamine or endorphins or whatever while you're doing something, and you start to associate that with the thing you're doing and casting it in a positive light rather than it being a task.
We do that with a lot of the work we do, especially, when I think about self-care. A lot of families come in and they're like brushing their hair or brushing their teeth or washing their hair with soap and water and getting that out. All of this is the hardest, and it's a battle, and it's such a fight. And so we'll bring in washcloths and make washcloths fun in water play, just with a bucket and then squirt guns and spraying each other's faces. We just desensitize all of that and make it fun. In food, we do the same thing. Like for a parent that has a child that's not eating, that's one of the hardest things. You have to feed your kid every day, 3 to 9 times a day, depending on how many meals and snacks they have. And every time, if they're not eating, the parent feels like a failure. So the child sees the food as stressful, though. So we make the food fun, and we do fun, silly things with the food, and we turn it into play so that food is not threatening. And then maybe it makes it to the mouth or just the lips or the tongue. And then maybe we take some bites and spit it out. And, it's a whole process, but it's all about making that positive association, like you said, to make this thing that to us seems so normal and regular, and like it's an apple or it's, a ball to catch, whatever it is, it's a pencil to write. It's very threatening to them. And it sends their stress signals up right away, just hearing the word homework or seeing a pencil to write, but we make it positive through play.
How does a person or a parent go about contacting you to get services? Is there a referral chain if they're seeing a need that could be met by your services? How do they get there?
So a lot of our referrals come in through the doctor's offices. A lot of the doctor's offices in the area refer to us, and even out of the area, we have some families that drive over an hour to come see us right now. But we also have it set up so that parents can just call our office directly and talk to one of our office staff, even if they don't know, which therapy the child might need. Tell us what's going on, what struggles your child is having, and then we can help them determine, you might need a physical therapy evaluation or occupational therapy evaluation. And then we'll put them on our wait list. We'll contact the doctor's offices for them to get that referral. We'll contact their insurance company to make sure that the services are, covered by their insurance. We are in network with the majority of insurances, so that's a good thing too. But we also have private pay options if people don't have insurance.
So, Amy, do you have any advice then for a parent who might be wondering whether or not your services would be right for their family?
Noticing that your child is struggling or receiving a diagnosis, it can seem very scary and isolating for families, especially when they feel like they don't have the knowledge or the skills to support their child. And that's where our team of OTs, speech therapists, and physical therapists can come in and assure you that we can all and will grow through this. We will shine a light on all that makes your child wonderful while helping them develop the skills and supports to excel within their routines and at home and in the community. My favorite quote is, "Change is inevitable, but growth is a choice." And we really encourage families to grow along with us on this journey to empower children with exceptional needs.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for joining the show today. As a father of a child who receives OT, I can't tell you what a difference it makes, and I'd love to have you back in the future. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Nathan. I really appreciate all that you and Cliff at the Children's Trust have done in providing supports to the community and creating more awareness. And also just thank all the parents for their tireless efforts, because especially in today's world, it's hard to find the extra time to fit it all in, but we couldn't do this work for children without them.
To learn more about Reach for the Top and their services, visit www.reachftt.org. That's reachftt.org. Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.